So today we have a fully packed agenda from a number of speakers, and we're also aiming to make sure you allow plenty of time at the end for any questions that you might have after hearing from each of our speakers. We'll kick off with Mary from the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, who will provide an introduction to the COTS control component. We'll then hear from Dylan at Gibraltar to provide a strategic overview of the COTS control program. Next, you'll hear from Rick, another partner in the COTS control program from RRC, providing a video showing COTS activities or COTS control activities in action. Then you'll hear from a selection of our control divers showing their perspectives of being part of the COTS control program. You'll hear a summary from David from Gibraltar around the COTS control program achievements. And finally, you'll hear from Mary again around our COTS control innovation program. And last but not least, we'll hopefully then have around 15 to 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. We'd love to hear from as many of you with any questions you might have about the COTS control component and the COTS control program and innovation program. I encourage you all to answer or put in any questions you might have into the Q&A chat box. That should be at the bottom of your screen. And I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the session, and then we'll be sharing those questions with our panelists to answer once they've shared their presentations with you. So over to Mary.
Thanks, Amber. So hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mary Bonin. I'm a director at the foundation overseeing the COTS control component of the Reef Trust Partnership. And we're here today to talk about the work we're doing with our partners to control this, which is one of the reef's most notorious and prickly pests, the correlating crown-of-thorns starfish, or COTS. So these starfish have population explosions, which we call outbreaks, that spread along the length of the Great Barrier Reef and do a lot of damage, and they can wipe out entire coral communities. So in fact, these starfish outbreaks are really one of the major threats and top causes of coral decline on the Great Barrier Reef. But the good news is that we can manage this reef pest, and we're getting better and better at it every day. So that's really important because relieving this pressure really gives the reef a fighting chance against global pressures like climate change. So I'll start off today by giving you just a brief overview of the activities we're funding under the RTP COTS component, and then I'll pass on to our panel of guest speakers who'll give you really a deep dive into what's happening on the water with the COTS control program. And so we've got a packed agenda with five speakers and also a lovely video. So thanks, Amber. So the Reef Trust Partnership is investing $57.8 million into COTS control, and the really key goals of this investment are to maintain on-ground action through the COTS control program over a number of years, to fund research and innovation to improve our ability to manage these pests at scale. And we're also funding work to expand the delivery partners involved in COTS control with a particular focus on traditional owners. And finally, we're also working to develop a long-term funding strategy for control because we realize this threat isn't going away anytime soon, and we really need to ensure we have the resources into the future to manage it. Thanks, Amber. So with those goals in mind, that really reflects the breakdown of our portfolio investment strategy. We have 41.5 million to deliver the COTS control program over a number of years, 9.8 million here in the green to design and deliver the innovation program, and 5.8 million to invest in training and capacity building for traditional owner-led control. And then we also have some smaller slivers of the pie, which are key supporting and enabling projects. And that includes independent scientific reviews, the first of which was completed by Murdoch University, and that report's available via our website. We're also funding some forums that bring together all the stakeholders working in this space to share knowledge and drive collaboration. We had a forum in March this year, and links to those talks and that program are available via our website and RRC's YouTube page. And also this year, of course, we're kicking off some investment activities related to developing that long-term funding strategy and also community engagement. But the real focus of today's webinar is that big blue slice of the pie, which is the COTS Control Program. Thanks, Amber. So this program has been around for over a decade now. So a lot of you have probably heard of it. And in the beginning, it was a relatively small scale program aimed at supporting the reef tourism industry, particularly offshore Cairns and Port Douglas, where these outbreaks tend to initiate. And it was really focused on helping prevent localized COTS damage at tourism sites. And then over the past decade, and especially over the past 5 years, there's been an injection of science into the program, pardon the pun, through the NESP Integrated Pest Management research. And that's really transformed the program into what is a highly strategic and effective pest management program, which is today the largest scale intervention on the reef that's aimed at directly protecting coral. And so under the partnership, we're delivering this program as a partnership between the Foundation, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, and the Reef and Rainforest Research Center. And then the program has 5 vessels with that are crewed with over 100 trained divers employed by Inlock, Pacific Marine Group, and Blue Planet Marine. So you'll be hearing stories from all those COTS divers from the field today. And so, yeah, without further delay, I'll now introduce our next speaker, Dylan Horn from the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority.
Hello, everyone. I think we can just jump straight to the next slide. In the next 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to attempt to cover the program's strategic context, including the goal, and some of the strategies we use to get the most benefits out of the limited resources that we have. So the highest level question is, why do we do COTS control? And the simple reason is that COTS are a major source of coral decline, and COTS control is an effective way of protecting coral. Like I said, that's quite a simple statement, but there's a lot of weight behind that statement. And to demonstrate that weight, I'd point to these 2 documents here. On the left there, we've got the Marine Park Authority's 5-yearly Outlook report, which is a comprehensive review of reef science that recognises COTS as a major cause of coral decline, alongside things like cyclones and bleaching. And on the right there, of course, we've got the Australian and Queensland government's Reef 2050 long-term sustainability plan, which recognises COTS control as a key initiative that's supported by both governments. Within that strategic context, we've got the program itself, and the program's goal there is to protect coral on high-value reefs by suppressing COTS outbreaks below ecologically sustainable levels. I'd just like to quickly explain 2 parts of that goal. The first part is the idea of suppressing COTS outbreaks. So we're not trying to eliminate or eradicate all COTS. The idea is to get the starfish numbers down low enough so that the coral can grow faster than the starfish can eat them. The other part of that goal that I just want to touch on is that we're focusing on high value reefs. There's around 3,000 odd reefs in the marine park, and it's just not possible for us to get to all of them. So the way we get the best benefits is by prioritising effort on those reefs where we're going to get the best bang for buck. And I think we'll go to the next slide, please, Amber. So I mentioned about that, how we target our effort to get the best bang for buck. I'm going to try and give a quick overview of how we do that with this slide. The way we target high-value reefs is to essentially identify 2 sets of reefs. And by identifying 2 sets, that enables us to do our annual operational planning within a longer-term strategic approach. So the first set is our priority reefs that we identify. The priority reefs are a bigger set of reefs. They don't need culling every single year, but these are reefs that are important to consider at some point during the 15-year outbreak cycle of crown-of-thorns starfish. We identify the priority reefs based on their high economic or ecological value. So economic value means these are the reefs that support the tourism industry, and ecological value means that these are the reefs that most support recovery and are the most connected to other reefs in the Great Barrier Reef. There's 600 priority reefs in that cohort, which represents around about 20% of all reefs on the Great Barrier Reef. Sitting under that, we identify an annual set of target reefs. So this is a subset of the priority reefs that we intend to try and control in any one year. This year we have 213 target reefs. Just like the priority reefs, the target reefs have high ecological and economic value, but they're also the reefs that we think are in greatest need of immediate attention, whether that's by virtue of the COTS distribution or their coral cover, or other factors which change more on an annual basis. The distribution of the target reefs for this year is shown on that map. That shows the 213 target reefs that we're trying to get to. And the different colours of those dots represent different levels of priority within that target reefs cohort. We have 5 vessels as part of the control program at the moment that go out, and they're diligently working through their target reef lists. So the 3 vessels in the north are operated by Inlock. The one in the central region there, the second one from the bottom, that's Pacific Marine Group's area. And down south, we've got Blue Planet Marine operating. So next slide, please, Amber. Right, so once the vessels have their target reefs and they set off and try and work through them, the next level of trying to optimize our effort we do through a decision support process. The decision support process is based on Integrated Pest Management, and it was developed through the National Environmental Science Program, and we implemented it in the program in 2018. What that process does is essentially to support decisions about how vessels should carry out COTS management activities when they get to a reef. And in particular, this means how much effort they put in to get those COTS levels down to where they're sustainable. And it also supports decisions about how frequently vessels should go back to reefs. The IPM decision process is really helping us get, it's helping us squeeze more out of those resources. And I mentioned that at the start, but I'll just reiterate the different layers of prioritization that we have through this program, whether it's the priority reefs, the target reefs, or the integrated pest management decision support process. It's all about getting the absolute most benefit we can out of our limited resources. And there's a constant focus on trying to improve how we do that. So next up, Rick's going to show us a little video that gives us a closer look at what those COTS management activities actually are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. I created a short video to show you the great work the on-water operators are doing every day when they go into the reef. Amber, can you play the video, please? have the pleasure to introduce Stephanie from Inlock to talk more about the on-water operations. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Great video that was taken on Tura. I'm very proud to say. Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephanie Lucht. I've been working for the crown-of-thorns starfish control program for 4 years now. Thanks, Amber. Next slide, please. The Inlock fleet consists of 3 large COTS control vessels and a smaller surveillance vessel. I started my COTS diving career on Venus 2. From there, I furthered my knowledge working on both Hero and Tura, and after 2 years, I became the master of Artemis, our 7.5 meter surveillance vessel. Artemis was paired with Venus 2 to survey and control the reefs between Cairns and Lizard Island. Thanks, Amber. I've been asked to share with you what this control program means to me. When people ask what I do for a job, my answer is, I'm just a diver. But what I really mean to say is, I, along with my crew, have the greatest diving job in the world. The vast number of reefs I have visited and the time spent in water, I think is quite unique to this control program. I can't imagine there are many more jobs in the industry which give the people the opportunity to spend as much time on and in the water as we do controlling COTS. To see visible changes in the number of COTS culled at specific sites and new coral growth in the previously damaged areas by COTS is incredible. Being a COTS diver is an amazing experience, but it comes with its unique set of challenges, such as working around less favourable weather conditions. Each reef site dive is different and the weather is always changing. I have seen firsthand what a positive impact the COTS Control Program has had in helping the reef. One of the amazing things with the COTS program is that we can help the reef today. Thanks, Amber. For the past year, I've been given the opportunity to lead a team of exceptional divers as their dive supervisor on MV Tura. My team are a diverse bunch of divers with a keen interest in the reef. My crew are awesome, hardworking, and fun, and I really love being a part of our crew. Tura is a 24-meter vessel, which we spend 10 days at sea, and then we have 4 days back on land to recuperate. Thanks, Amber. My team have been focusing on the COTS outbreak off the coast of Townsville. We have been concentrating on a few reefs. One of such is Big Broadhurst Reef. Big Broadhurst is located 40 nautical miles off the coast of Townsville, but it is 160 nautical miles as the crow flies from Cairns. It is not uncommon to have a straight 20 to 24-hour steam day one. Getting close enough to the sites to dive where you are protected from the wind and swell and have a good bottom for anchorage can also be challenging. Our skippers do an excellent job in overcoming these issues, and sometimes it means that they will stay live at the helm during the day while we dive. The most common place this will occur is on the outside wall of the weather face. This is too deep to anchor. Thanks, Amber. Big Broadhurst is quite a large reef. It requires 110 kilometres of man towing to survey the 145 cull sites present. Since the initial surveillance voyage at the end of August last year, of these 145 cull sites, my crew have culled 97 of them, performed RIS surveys on 86, closed 76 cull sites, and have an additional 21 sites still open. This has resulted in over 10,000 COTS culled over the past financial year. The great news is that we are seeing a noticeable drop in the number of COTS culled each time we visit these open sites, and will continue to do so until the CPUE or the catch per unit effort thresholds are achieved. Thanks, Amber. Over the past financial year, the Inlock crew from Hero, Tura and Venus have spent 722 days at sea, performed 7,457 in-water dive hours, visited 80 different reefs, managed 463 unique cull sites, and have culled over 36,000 COTS. This is over an area of 4,990 hectares of reef. Thanks, Amber. Everyone who visits the Great Barrier Reef can help in the fight against COTS by reporting the COTS sighting on the Eye on the Reef app. Thanks for listening, guys. Next, I'd like to introduce Uzo from Pacific Marine Group.
All right, thanks for that, Stephanie. So hi, everyone. I think a lot of you guys know me as Usto. I'm very fortunate to work alongside such great, amazing people. And I'm just going to quickly talk about just the area that my team and I are managing at the moment, which is that between Townsville and the Mackay region. Next slide. Thanks, Amber. So like I was just saying, I'm very fortunate that I get to live with 16 brothers and sisters on board our mothership Odyssey. And the area that we cover is roughly between that of the Palm Islands and the Whitsundays. Not obviously every single reef. We do intertwine a lot with Inlock. And it's just been a fantastic last 3 years that we've been able to do this. Next slide, please, Amber. So I think a lot of you who've had the action group meetings with me, you've heard me talk about John Brewer to a never-ending moments. But I'm gonna just for one last time give you a rundown of everything we've done in John Brewer as a case study over the last 3 years. So this animation is similar to the one I presented at the conference, and you'll see that all the zones depicted have just a color code to them. Basically, red, it means the CPU is extremely high, and green means the zones got closed. So as we go through these animations, hopefully I'll just touch a little bit about what's going on. So basically, yeah, that's representing trip 1. And as you can see, from the very get-go, when we got to John Brewer, it's starting to be bright red. And it will continue so all the way up to trip 6. At this point, we sort of figured out that we needed to sort of change our strategy, just sort of going in the water, as I'd say, willy-nilly and just randomly try to cull as many COTS as possible wasn't really working for us. So we sort of changed our dive strategy, started making new formations and new tactics, see if that would help. And even though in one part it does help, because we started seeing more COTS showing up on our call dives, as you'll see now, it just meant that more bright red zones appeared. But it just sort of comes with the game of getting better at it. And this just sort of continued on for a little while. And we're getting pretty frustrated by these trips. So, this is now going to be 16 trips into John Brewer, and it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere. So we figured, okay, well, how do we attack this even better? So we started bringing GPS floats with us and try to, tackle every single layer of that zone with GPS floats to indicate where we've been. And off we went again, try to use that tactic. And again, as you can see, trip by trip, even though now on the weather side, all that green area is now finally under control, the leeward side isn't. And then one of the things that we've discovered by this trip 25 is that little COTS actually exists. I know it sounds a bit silly, but it's been a while that we've just sort of been so focused on the larger COTS, and that's all we really had our eye in for, that a few of us started seeing there's these little COTS hidden in there, and obviously at that time, and you guys know that's changed, but at that time they were part of the CPUE. So off we went again, calling lots and lots of little COTS. So that sort of was holding us back for a little while. Then we brought in aerial imagery, so we used our drones to depict the zones, and again, just trying to be more and more precise. I can tell you that after 3 years at John Brewer, we really know this reef like the back of our hand. And again, trip after trip after trip. There's good news at the end of this slide, I promise. Yeah, so at this point now, Daniel Schultz joined us, and we said, look, Daniel, we're not getting anywhere. No matter how many times we go around and around this reef, we're still getting COTS. At that point, we sort of actually figured out that maybe the COTS were coming from inside the lagoon. So as you can see from that image there, we just opened up the whole lagoon and started culling through. And that's when we started sort of making a change. So as soon as we started culling the lagoon, that's when we realized that, here's where the real issue was. All of those COTS that were inside there were sort of continuously replenishing the outside. And once we got a hold of that, and again, we brought in new technologies like Allison over there, our ROV, we're able to sort of get a good hold of it until 2 days ago. So we're going to go up to now trip 66, which lo and behold, finally, John Brewer looks like it's in a manageable position, and we're very, very happy. This is what it looks like at the moment. So we've only got 6 zones left, and they're all just above threshold. So we're stoked. We never thought we'd see this day, but here we are. This next slide, it's just very quickly, it's the same thing you just seen there with the infographics, but that's just showing you over CPUE. And once again, just all the different things that we brought in over the years to sort of help us along. So it's all right, Amber, if you can just skip past this. It's the same thing, just again, showing it over the years. And lastly, when we get asked if we've had any impact, it's very hard to sort of put into context everything we've done. So one of the things we calculated this last year was trying to figure out how do you tell the general public how many COTS we've removed, and saying 85,000 is well and good, but we figure that our best statistic at the moment to contextualize it is to say that 85,000 COTS removed is the equivalent of having filled roughly 22,090 kangaroo pouches. And I thought that was maybe fitting for the Australian context because everybody knows what a kangaroo is. So that was sort of our metric. Yeah. And that's pretty much it for me. Thanks everyone again for, oh, sorry, I was going to talk about the bleaching events. Long story short, yeah, we're very fortunate that we've been able to collect data during these bleaching events and help inform policies in the science. Yeah, so again, thanks everyone for having me on board. I'm going to pass on now to Elizabeth. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Liz. I am one of the voyage leaders for Blue Planet Marine's 2 COTS crews, and we operate in the very far southern section of the Great Barrier Reef. And this is our home on the right there, Flying Fish 5. It's a 20-metre west coaster vessel, and we use 2 tenders to Flying Fish for our daily in-water ops. And Blue Planet Marine, we operate out of Gladstone Marina and conduct 13-day voyages, and we alternate 2 teams, and they're made up of 12 crew, which is 8 divers and 4 marine crew. Thanks, Amber. So Blue Planet Marine, we began operating in the Capricorn Bunker Group, which is the green dots down the south there. For just over 12 months, we focused on COTS management in cap bunkers, and there are 21 reefs in this area, including Heron and Lady Elliot and Musgrave. Some people might have heard of these ones. And we are fortunate enough to see the entire circumference of these world famous reefs through our manta tow surveys, RIS surveys, and while we're down there managing the COTS populations to a sustainable level. So we're very fortunate. Blue Planet Marine have managed to achieve good results in the cap bunkers, locating COTS outbreaks while they're isolated early on, often in one location of the reef, such as at Fitzroy Reef, where we saw a COTS outbreak about 500 metres off the reef slope, so pretty far off the reef, but at about 24 metres depth on a separate ridge. We're finding some of them are coming up from the depths from separate ridges, which are feeding the reefs, but it's different everywhere. We've also spotted COTS at, COTS were spotted just because the visibility was great on a safety stop after exploratory dives. We found an outbreak at Lady Elliot way down south there, that final further south point in the green. But they're all isolated on the southwestern side of the reef, and we've greatly reduced the numbers of the larger fertile size COTS here. And so now we're just making sure we go back periodically to control the many juvenile COTS, which are hidden really well in the branching coral. So our first visit to our other area of ops, the Swains Reef, that's the yellow points out there. That was in March this year, and our target reefs here are throughout both green and blue zones and near the pink zone of Gannet Cay. After surveillance out there, we located outbreaks at several of our target reefs within close proximity to each other. So, and still reefs that were like less than a nautical mile away, which were COT-free. So it's really interesting to see the distribution across the intricate reef system that is the Swains. So to give you an idea of COTS numbers, our first voyage to the Swains, we culled about 6,500 COTS in 3.5 days. with 8 divers across about 5 relatively small reefs. So versus our last voyage, most recent to the Swains, we culled about 3,500 COTS in 7 days. So the numbers have significantly reduced, and that change has happened over 7 voyages out there. So that's a positive, and we're just maintaining our reef surveys, reef health impact surveys, to see how the coral cover could potentially improve over time as we manage the COTS numbers down to a threshold which is sustainable for those reefs. And there are lots of extra safety considerations we need to take into account out of the Swains. It's so isolated and remote. It's 130 nautical miles from our Gladstone port, so it's a really long way for emergency services to come. So BPM's developed really thorough safety protocols. Out there, we're a lot more conservative with our dive limits, and the safety of crew and fatigue management during the night transits out is always a priority, because we know that a well-rested crew is a more efficient crew. And we've also been using the Capricorn bunkers as a bit of a stepping stone out to the Swains. We start the voyage off the first few days at the Cap bunkers, wait for our weather window, and then we head out to the Swains. Thanks, Amber. Okay, so Blue Planet Marine's also involved in a bit of other research support out in the field. The predator of the COTS, the Triton snail, sightings are recorded, and COTS plankton sampling from the water column. We take those for AIMS research project. COTS tissue samples are taken, and we send those to UQ for genetics research. BPM's also got lots of opportunities out on the water for community and industry contact. So we liaise and share our COTS whereabouts knowledge, methods and techniques with Lady Elliot, who are conducting their own COTS control periodically as well. So it's great to know that if we can't make it down there for a voyage or two, there is still some management going on, because it can be difficult to get down there. We also hear reports of COTS outbreaks in other locations throughout the Swains and from the outer reefs from commercial fishing vessels. So they use viewfinders to see where their trout is underwater. And so they also physically see the COTS outbreaks as well, and they let us know and we pass this on. And then also, of course, members of the public as well, we see out there come and chat to us, and they often let us know where they've sighted COTS around the reef, which is great, because the more eyes on the reef, the better. So thanks, everyone. If you ever see us out there, Blue Planet Marine on Flying Fish, come and say hi. Thanks. And just on to Dave now, who will be talking from Gaboompa, talking about program achievements.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, hello, everyone. I think what's pretty clear is that these on-water operators are putting in a really diligent and committed effort out there on the reef, and we are really having impacts across the park, from essentially Cooktown in the north to Gladstone in the south. And the outcomes that we're seeing, I guess, have surpassed many of the expectations that we might have had of what's possible with crown-of-thorns starfish management on the Great Barrier Reef. It's an enormous area and it's a big problem. But what we're seeing now is that humans are pretty darn good at being able to find these starfish aggregations and efficiently cull them down to sustainable levels. Amber, if we could skip across. Yeah, so just to give you a little quick overview of what we've managed to achieve since the introduction of the Integrated Pest Management system in late 2018. We've actioned over 255 reefs for COTS management. We're getting to about 100 reefs a year. And a lot of those reefs that we've been dealing with have had quite, moderate to severe outbreaks of starfish on them. So there has been several reefs, as also outlined with John Brewer, where we've got bogged down for quite a while and really dealing with a very severe outbreak. But what's encouraging to me is that, we have actually saved a fair bit of coral on reefs like John Brewer and others. And for the time and energy that's been invested in those reefs, we're seeing real world benefits for coral protection, and that has serious consequences for ongoing adaptation of the marine park to current and future change that we're seeing. So over these last few years, we've invested over 38,000 diver hours into culling COTS. Over 300,000 COTS have been culled. And in fact, if we track all the way back to the very origins of this program in about 2011, there's upwards of 1 million starfish that have been culled over the last decade or so. So it's quite an incredible effort. So we've seen coral protection from COTS predation over about 14,000 hectares of reef. So we're starting to have some real sort of significant, ecologically significant benefit across the park. We also work with the Reef Joint Field Management Program, which is a collaboration between the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. We also work with the Institute of Marine Science and the tourism industry, who provide reconnaissance of a broader range of reefs beyond those where the COTS program vessels are getting to. And that provides really valuable reconnaissance on the status of coral and COTS populations right throughout the park. We use that information, as Dylan alluded to at the start, to help us steer the effort towards the reefs that are most in need at the moment, and to think about the future targeting of reefs as we move forward. We'll skip across. Next slide, Amber. Okay, so what's pretty clear is that we've been able to effectively suppress COTS. And I think, you know, Dylan mentioned right at the start as well, is that we're not trying to eradicate them. We're not trying to, you know, completely remove them from the marine park. They're a natural part of the ecosystem. So all we're trying to do is manage them and keep them at sustainable levels, find them, reduce them to sustainable levels, and then keep them there. So the reefs we're working, we have to keep a close eye on those reefs. The outbreaks often do re-emerge. We might go in and cull for several voyages, knock them down to sustainable levels, and then, you know, starfish will move back onto those corals again. So it is ongoing control and maintenance through time. It's not enough just to cull them once and then move on and forget about that reef. So what we've seen is that currently the outbreaks most severe on reefs between about Townsville and the Whitsundays and in the Swains and Capricorn Bunker group. As Liz mentioned, in the Capricorn Bunkers, they've done a wonderful job of reducing the outbreak severity on a good number of reefs there, and they've moved into the Swains. And as she said, you know, 6,500 COTS in 3 days in the Swains. I mean, there's enormous densities of COTS on some of those reefs out there. So the outbreak is burning pretty hot on a lot of those reefs. And we have to make some very pragmatic decisions about which reefs we're going to continue on and which reefs we're going to walk away from and say that's an unmanageable outbreak. So there's some pretty tough decisions that are made right from the initial planning of this program right through to our day-to-day operations. And you know, I commend everybody on the team for the work they contribute to that. And I think we can only get better from here. Amber, next slide, please. Now, when we're thinking about the amount of coral we're protecting on these reefs, it's actually quite difficult to get accurate estimates of coral cover routinely through time and to accurately measure it. I mean, these guys are very busy finding the starfish and culling the starfish. It's less time is focused on actually measuring the changes in coral, but we do know that we are having some benefits for coral. And if we look across all of the reefs where we've worked in the last 12 months or so, there's 113 of those reefs that we actioned in the 2020-21 financial year. And on those reefs, we see average coral cover of about 25%. The change in coral cover over, you know, annualized change, so how much coral changes in any given year, is being reduced at nearly 5% on those reefs that are being heavily impacted by COTS. We have done some modelling and we have made some predictions about how much coral we would have lost had we not done this kind of culling on these reefs, and we would have been losing somewhere between 17 and 18% of the coral per year. So we are having we're not preventing all of the coral loss, but we're certainly having some pretty significant reduction on the amount of coral that's being lost. And these are the reefs that are most prone to crown-of-thorns currently. And they're also exposed, you know, as Uso alluded to bleaching and cyclones and all of the other cumulative pressures that the reef is facing. So COTS is one of the few things, you know, COTS management is one of the few things we can do at scale to really limit coral loss now. And it's pretty clear that on the reefs where we're putting a lot of energy, we are having some pretty significant coral protection benefit. And I think as we learn more about these reefs, as we learn about improved efficiency of the program, and I guess as Dylan said, getting maximum bang for buck out of every day on the water. We're starting to really see some serious marine park scale benefits of this program. So thanks very much, and I'll throw it back to Mary, who's going to talk about the COTS Control Innovation Program. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, thanks for all the speakers so far. Really clear how much great work is going into COTS management in the field, and great to see those coral protection outcomes being estimated and that are significant. So the program's kicking lots of goals, obviously, but there's still plenty of opportunity to improve. And so I just wanted to touch base about the COTS Control Innovation Program. The intention here is just to give you a brief overview, and then in a future RTP In Focus webinar, we'll do a deep dive into the research program. But the mission of this program is to really deliver research and innovations that improve the efficiency and effectiveness of COTS surveillance and control. We're looking at continuous improvement. And so the program is really building on all the excellent science that was delivered through the NESP Integrated Pest Management research. And we have a budget of $9.8 million from the RTP, plus co-contributions from our partners, who are the Australian Institute of Marine Science, CSIRO, James Cook University, and the University of Queensland. So all organizations that have had active research programs in this field for a while. And we've also brought in additional experts from other institutions and organizations through an open expression of interest process last year. So thanks, Amber. So in terms of time frames, the innovations program is a 4-year program with 2 phases. So phase 1 was the design phase, which we completed last year. We're actually really having a careful think about where we invest in research. And then phase 2, which is just kicking off this year and is a 3-year program of research, where as we deliver those outcomes, we'll be thinking very closely and working with all the people you're hearing from today, managers and end users, about trialing and integrating the outcomes of the research into the control program on the water. Thanks, Amber. So this is just a big picture overview of the design phase outcomes. So during that process, we engaged 43 technical experts, our steering committee members, and 4 external assessors in structured decision-making to design the research program. And in the beginning, you know, our goal here is to take that broad horizon scan and then systematically assess our investment options. So we understood the trade-offs we were making in taking different investment approaches. And at the outset, we identified 6 research themes, which are there on the left-hand side of your screen, that are relevant to driving innovation in COTS management. And then those technical teams collectively identified over 300 knowledge gaps across those areas. And then from that, developed 52 research opportunities to fill the most crucial gaps, and then assess their relative costs, benefits, innovation potential, risks, of those kind of things. And then we used those 52 opportunities as building blocks to develop some different portfolio and explore different portfolio investment strategies. And that led us to prioritization of 21 research projects in the portfolio that makes up our R&D program. Thanks, Amber. So this is just an overview of that research program. Again, we'll go into a deep dive on this in a future webinar, but we've structured the R&D program under 3 subprogram themes: prediction, detection, and response. Because we recognize how important these factors are in effective suppression and prevention of outbreaks. So, you know, the stories you're hearing from the field, USA's example of John Brewer Reef really just illustrates how important early prediction, detection, and then response is. It gets much harder to control pests when they've already, you know, populations at a reef are already quite high and high outbreaks. So we want to get in, do all the science and deliver all the tools we can to get there early. So the there's 3 sub-programs. The prediction sub-program is really field and laboratory-based work that delivers new empirical knowledge of understanding early life history of COTS, the drivers of outbreaks and their termination, and the role of predators in mitigating outbreaks. So critical to understand the pest that we're trying to control. And then under the detection subprogram, we have 4 projects that are really focused on developing in improving our strategies and technologies for early detection. So to give us the earliest possible warning of impending outbreaks so we can get in and act and respond quickly and effectively. And then the response subprogram is a collection of 11 research projects that are really multidisciplinary. We've got work on modeling and decision support tools that guide our strategic and tactical response to outbreaks, and also explore for the first time really the cultural and social perceptions and values that underpin our management approach. So ultimately, across the research portfolio, the goal here is to deliver new knowledge, tools, and technologies that help the people you've heard from today better suppress and prevent outbreaks on the Great Barrier Reef. So with that, I will wrap it up and open it up to questions. I think we have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Mary and panelists. First of all, I think it's a great indication of all of those incredible impacts and benefits of the program making a real difference, that all of you managed to keep to time, deliver amazing presentations, and the only hiccup was in the audio, which was obviously not on any of you. So a great correlation there, I think, between just how well the COTS program is going. I will just stop sharing screen and that way everybody is able to see all of our panelists here as we get to the Q&A section. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A chat, which is wonderful. And there's just a few I was hoping to start with that came through with registrations. And we have a little bit of time. So first of all, Dylan, I know you spoke to this quite extensively in your presentation, but there are a number of questions during registrations around how do we go about prioritising reefs? So perhaps both a process, but also criteria that goes into what makes a priority reef and then the target reef, as you spoke to.
No worries. It's a great question, and to do it justice would take a lot longer than we have here. So I've been pondering how to do it in a sort of simplified way. So what I'll do is try and run through a simplified explanation of how we identify the target reefs. That's the sort of smaller cohort of reefs that we try and get to in any one financial year. This year, to identify the target reefs, we started with four key objectives, 4 things we were trying to achieve out of that set of reefs. So one was to maximize the ecological value of the reefs in there. Second one was to maximize the economic value of the reefs. Third one, maximize the logistical feasibility. So the reefs had to be, accessible and workable. And the fourth one is maximize the coral protection in the short term. So with those 4 objectives established, we then went away and got data to enable assessment against each of those objectives. So for the ecological value, there's coral and COTS connectivity modeling, empirical coral cover data, COTS coral recovery monitoring. There's heaps of stuff there. So we've got all of that. For the economic value, there's tourism data. There's the locations of where the pontoons and the moorings are. There's data for who's going where. For the logistical feasibility, we spoke to the operators and got some information about where can we safely access, where can we work, what areas might be off limits for various reasons. And for the objective about maximizing coral protection in the short term, we used intel from AIMS and the Joint Field Management Program to get an idea of, where were the areas in greatest need of COTS management now? Where were the areas under threat or under imminent threat of COTS outbreaks? Where are areas where coral might be recovering really well that we want to, focus to keep that recovery going. So with those 4 objectives established and all that data, we basically brought it all together did a whole bunch of analytical stuff, and ID the reefs. Now, if Sam Matthews is listening, I apologise for skipping over that analytically dense exercise, but for the sake of this explanation, that's basically what we did. And eventually that took us to a list of reefs that best fulfill those criteria. One more quick thing I'll touch on is the consideration of some trade-offs between those objectives. So for example, when I showed that list of target reefs, you might have noticed that we don't have any target reefs in the far north region this year. The reason for that was because while there are reefs in the far north that have high ecological or economic value, after talking to the operators, we decided that it wasn't really going to be feasible to work there, among other reasons, because there's just too many crocodiles up there and it's not really safe to be doing manitoes. So that's an example of how we manage a trade-off. You know, for this year, we decided that it just wasn't really worth trying to conduct operations up there. I'm happy to follow up with a more detailed explanation afterwards, but I hope that gives an overview of how we did that reef prioritisation process.
Fantastic, thank you, Dylan. And I appreciate you could probably have a whole hour webinar on that process alone. So thank you for summarising so succinctly. We've had a couple of questions come through in the Q&A box that I thought we'd jump to next in the interest of time, but we'll keep the webinar open an extra 5 minutes if that's okay for our panelists and see how we go. But one of the questions was around, the John Brewer Reef example. Is this a common experience where reefs like John Brewer, where you need to adapt the culling effort to sort of try and get to the bottom of why these COTS keep reoccurring? Is this something, a regular occurrence that I guess this is a question for the divers that you find? Perhaps Uzo?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. No, I think a lot of what drives our innovation spirit is it's just the crew themselves are really passionate about conservation. It's not something it's not something that trickles from the top down. It sort of trickles the other way around. So I think, and I'm sure the other operators can relate, it's something that just when you're having dinner together, you think, if we tried that tomorrow, maybe we can be better, we'll see a better result the next trip. So a lot of that data that we'll see from John Brewer and its big outbreak it's skewed in that it's a kind of a catch-22, which is the better we get, the more cuts we cull, therefore the worse it looks. But that just sort of comes with time and passion, and yeah, I can't be more thankful to my crew for that, and just every day is just as exciting as the day before.
It's great that Uzo's coming live to us from the field, from the boat, for this webinar. And that's great, Uzo. It sounds like there's a strategic planning and prioritization with all the data that we have access to, goes hand in hand with flexibility and adaptability to what you're finding in the field as well, with all of those 100+ trained divers out there doing what you do best. So thank you for that.
And I would just say, I think it's probably safe to say John Brewer is an example of an incredibly hard reef to manage, because the outbreak was so intense when the control program actually got in there. I'm hard pressed to think of another reef that's been as challenging as John Brewer has. I don't know if the group from the field can speak to that, but I think it's probably an example of one of our most challenging outbreaks to manage, because the outbreak was so intense when we first got in. I think in a lot of other cases, again, the guys in the field can speak to this, but if you're getting in there earlier, you're able to effectively manage those COTS numbers down a lot more quickly. And that's where that early detection and response is really critical.
Stephanie, I can see you've got your hand raised if you wanted to add anything there.
Yeah, Amber, I would actually. I'd just like to sort of solidify what Mary's saying about the early detection and how positive it is for what we do. We periodically survey some of these target reefs, and a good example of this is Wheeler. So we went to Wheeler Reef not long ago for periodical surveillance, And we weren't expecting to find COTS, and we did, and we found quite a substantial number of COTS. And what we found is they were coming from the deep side of the southwest weather face, and it was almost as if they were crawling up the weather face of the reef. So they hadn't quite gotten to what we would call the slope yet, but it was really good to see that early detection. And from that, we've been able to start the initial culling of that reef. And then we've actually passed that reef on to Uzo, who's doing a great job at Pacific Marine Group. Very happy to have them have Wheeler in a high regards like we do as well, because everyone in the Townsville area will know it's such a beautiful reef with really great visibility, and so many tourist operators go there as well. And I suppose we can touch on the other question from Michael, sorry. Do divers see COTS to depth on the deep faces below workable depths? That would be a good example of when we surveyed it, we saw the COTS were quite deep, and they're deeper than our working dive limits. From there, we asked our DP whether we could go to a deeper depth of 25 meters, which we did, and we did find that they were still sort of almost working their way up the weather face, you know. So we just kept hitting those cull sites, and I'm sure Uzo can probably jump in and continue with this, maybe. Information about
yeah.
Wheeler?
Well, I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much, because we've been blessed with Wheeler and the things that we've seen. We got to see a tiger shark, believe it or not, last trip over there, so that was incredible. But on the COTS side, yeah, like you said, they're definitely in the deep. You know, most of our dives, we spend them between 15 to 20 meters, and in those dives, in about half an hour, because you know we are pretty deep, so we run through our air pretty quickly. But in that half an hour, we'll come up with 200 COTS amongst us 8 divers. So, and this last trip we just got back from, we called about 800 COTS in 4 days, and that's sort of been reoccurring. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I don't want another jumper situation with Wheeler, and I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, thanks so much for passing that on, and all the help you guys have given us.
That's right. It's good to work together.
It's great to see that it's a team effort and inter-team effort amongst you all out there on the reef. So I guess speaking of team effort and bringing the community on board in that team effort, Mary, we had a question in the chat box about you know, any community engagement activities planned or happening around the COTS control program in particular, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Yeah, that was one of the areas of investment under the RTP. It's a relatively small slice of the investment funding, but we're looking at it. We haven't kicked it off yet, but I think probably the best opportunities for community engagement and control is to link the community to providing information, particularly surveillance information, that then helps us strategically target what reefs we're investing resources in through the control program. So I think that's probably, you know, I know there's so many great, you know, there's community out on the reef every day, and we want to tap into that and use that information, those eyes in the water, as much as we can to help prioritize and our effort through the control program. So watch this space.
Thanks, Mary. And I think John Brewer Reef seems to be you know, everyone's wanting to hear more about John Brewer Reef. So we'll make sure we include contact details after the webinar for anyone that would like to discuss anything further at all. And there's probably just one more question from the registrations, Mary, if we could touch on before we close. There's what surveillance is proposed for the initiation box, and perhaps a quick summary of what that is, and for how long will this be sustained?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really great question. So the initiation zone, for those who are not aware, is a region that we understand that COTS outbreaks initiate on the reef. It's a region between Cairns, essentially, and Cooktown. And if we can get in early as the outbreak is just kicking off, again, it's that early detection and then early response, then we can help suppress the spread of that outbreak across the reef. We've never actually had the resources and planning in place to be able to do that early warning surveillance in the initiation zone. But now, this year, thanks to all of these guys, we'll have a vessel, a COTS control vessel that'll be doing periodic surveillance, broad-scale mantato surveillance throughout the initiation zone, probably on a 6-monthly basis in the lead up to the next outbreak, which we expect to be probably fully underway by 2025 if it's following past outbreak cycles. And then in addition to that, through the innovation program, we're funding research that's going to be doing some more fine scale surveillance on top of that broad scale surveillance. So we'll have more detailed information about the increase in COTS densities and even smaller COTS as that outbreak is beginning to develop, which is really critical then for our annual strategic and tactical planning in the control program, so that we can then take that information from the research into account when we plan what reefs the control program will be actioning proactively. So it's really about, we're actually shifting now for probably the first time ever into a more proactive approach to managing the initiation of the next outbreak, which is really exciting.
It's so exciting, Mary. And so that we keep to our extra 5 minutes of time, we had one other question that I thought our divers, Liz, Stephanie, and Uzo might like to answer, perhaps in that order. So Liz first, then Stephanie and Uzo. I guess the question is around what motivated you or what drew you to working in the COTS control program? Why diving every day to manage COTS out on the reef? Liz.
Why diving every day? Oh, yeah. Why not, right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I just, wanted to do something to protect the reef, essentially. And it's really rewarding to see, it's 3 years I've been doing COTS control, and to see the change firsthand that's happening to the reef. So it's really rewarding, and just to be able to get in the water every day, and we see some incredible reefs that people are really hard to get to. People don't get to go to, so it's pretty special, and some amazing life as well. It's like a once in a lifetime job, really. Yeah.
Over to you, Stephanie.
I think Liz hit the nail on the head there, Del. I did my training on the tourist boats here in Cairns, and when I heard about the COTS control program, I was like, this is what I want to do. Just that conservation, feeling like you're helping it's really good feeling, and again, like Liz said, just exploring the different reefs that not many people get to go to is pretty incredible, and something that I really love doing. So yeah, that's pretty well me.
Uzo?
I think both Stephanie and Lizzie said exactly what I would say. In my particular case, I think being a little bit more foreign to some of the people on this panel, I grew up in the Middle East. In particular, I grew up in Dubai, and back in my youth, Dubai did have a fringing reef and a bit of a barrier reef to it, and it was lovely. But it wasn't something that the city decided to take care of, and I'm sure everybody's seen the Palm Islands that we have out there, and the massive hotels and world islands and all sorts of stuff. Long story short, we don't have a reef anymore. So I think that's just sort of what spurred me to take a career in conservation, and I've now been fortunate that I've been invited to come to Australia and help out here.
Amazing. I guess now would be the perfect time to drop those job ads for the COTS control program for any aspiring divers out there, but I think they're hotly contested by the sounds of things. So thank you to everybody. We have gone over time, and I'm conscious of all of our panelists' time, but thank you to everybody who joined and raised some questions. If there's anything else that you'd like answered, please drop it in the Q&A chat now if it's not already there, and we'll make sure that we follow those up. And a recording of the webinar will be available for those who weren't able to join today, or if you'd like to come back and rehear some of the amazing stories, then we'll have that available for you to look at your leisure as well. Thanks again to everybody, especially our esteemed panelists, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.